Steven Allen Spielberg was born on December 18th, 1946 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and then he moved to California shortly afterward to study film in college. He started his career directing several episodes for television, including Rod Serling's Night Gallery and also Columbo. In 1971, he finally got the chance to direct his own feature film, which was the film Duel. The film garnered critical acclaim from both audiences and critics, and essentially opened the door for Steven Spielberg to become the director that we came to know him as. Duel follows the story of a psychotic tanker truck driver who chases a terrifying salesman down a highway. Impressed with the film, executives decided to promote the film on television. Reviews were both positive, and Universal asked Spielberg to direct more scenes so that Duel could be released to international markets. Several films soon followed after that, including Something Evil and Savage. Both of those films didn't receive the same respect that Duel did, but it opened the door for Steven Spielberg to make his debut with a theatrical film, The Sugarland Express, about a married couple on the run, desperate to regain custody of their baby from foster parents, which was based on a true story. The film was the first of many collaborations with the composer John Williams, who has been working with him ever since, and Spielberg was impressed by his previous soundtracks, so that's why he hired him. The film opened to positive reviews and was a major hit, with the Hollywood Reporter calling Spielberg a major new director on the horizon. Although the film was honored for Best Screenplay in 1974 at the Cannes Film Festival, it was not a commercial success. Spielberg blamed Universal's inconsistent marketing for its poor box office results. Following that, Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown took a chance on Spielberg, giving him the opportunity to direct the 1975 horror thriller Jaws, based off the book by Peter Benchley. In the film, a great white shark attacks beachgoers on a summer resort town, prompting Police Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, to hunt it down with the help of a marine biologist, played by Richard Dreyfuss. Filming on the film proved to be very challenging. Spielberg almost drowned and escaped being crushed by boats while making the film. The filming schedule ran for over 100 days, and Universal actually threatened to cancel production. But against all odds, the film was both a critical and a financial success. Jaws won 3 Academy Awards, including Best Film Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, and Best Sound, with grosses more than $470 million worldwide, setting a then domestic box office record, leading to what the press called back then Jaws Mania, and making Steven Spielberg a household name. Alfred Hitchcock, after seeing Jaws, praised Spielberg for thinking outside the visual dynamics of the theater. He said, saying, he's the first one of us who doesn't see the proscenium arch. After Spielberg turned down Jaws 2, he went on to rework with Richard Dreyfuss to work on Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. During filming, Spielberg used 65mm film for the best picture quality possible, and a new live-action recording system so the recording could be duplicated later. It's one of the rare films both written and directed by Spielberg himself. Close Encounters was very popular with filmgoers, and Spielberg received his first Best Director nomination at the Academy Awards. He also earned 6 more nominations, with Best Cinematography and Best Sound Effects Editing being the big winners. The film was later released on a special edition in 1980. His next film was the 1979 film 1941, about Californians preparing for a Japanese invasion after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Spielberg was very self-conscious about doing comedy, as he had no prior experience in the genre. However, he was keen on tackling a light-hearted theme. Universal and Columbia agreed to finance the film, but the film didn't become the big hit that they thought it would, grossing only $92 million worldwide. But most critics, including the studio heads, disliked the film. The film has grown to have a cult following over the years, despite the bad reviews, and Spielberg shortly came back, not but a couple of years later, teaming up with George Lucas for the first time on Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first film in the Indiana Jones franchise. The title character played by Harrison Ford, who Lucas had previously cast as Han Solo in Star Wars. Ford was Spielberg's first choice in the film. It shot in North Africa. It was very difficult, but Spielberg said the experience helped him with the business acumen, and the film turned into another monster hit, both critically and financially. Won 5 Academy Awards. Spielberg got his second nomination for Best Director, as well as Best Picture. It was the film that really jump-started Spielberg's career, because the 1980s was dominated by films either he directed or produced. He co-produced Poltergeist, although there was the belief that he also directed it as well. He directed the segment Kick the Can in The Twilight Zone, the movie. But in 1982, his biggest success at that point was E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a story of a young boy and the alien he befriends who was accidentally left behind by his companions in an attempt to return home. Spielberg shot the film mostly in sequence to keep the child spontaneous toward the climax, and the film premiered in 1982 at the Cannes Film Festival, to which Kathleen Kennedy responded by saying, "You couldn't hear the end of the movie because people were on their feet stomping and yelling. It was one of the most amazing experiences." A special screening was later shown for President Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy, who were emotional at the end of the film, and E.T. dominated the box office, grossing $700 million worldwide and spawning a range of merchandise that would eventually earn up to $1 billion, as well as 9 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, winning 3 of them for sound effects, special effects, and Best Music. Following Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984, Spielberg, Frank Marshall, and Kathleen Kennedy founded the production company of Amblin Entertainment. Spielberg would either serve as either producer or executive producer on 19 different films between 1984 and 1991, including The Goonies, The Money Pit, Joe vs. the Volcano, Batteries Not Included, Back to the Future, Cape Fear, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In some of these films, Steven Spielberg's Presents would be a title on top of that, including Harry and the Hendersons and also Young Sherlock Holmes. By the end of the decade, Spielberg's production name was also attached to several TV shows, including The Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Freakazoid, and Family Dog, as well as producing the Don Bluth animations An American Tail and The Land Before Time. In 1985, Spielberg was offered a 2-year contract by NBC to produce a new series called Amazing Stories. The show was marketed as a blend between The Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but after 2 seasons and low ratings, the series was not reviewed, and although Spielberg's involvement as a producer would vary widely from project to project, Robert Zemeckis said that Spielberg would always respect the filmmaker's vision. Over the next decade, Spielberg's record as a producer brought mixed critical and commercial performances. In 1992, Spielberg decided to push back on producing, saying, "Producing had been the least fulfilling aspect of what I'd done in the last decade." However, 2 years later, he would find success in producing the long-running medical drama, ER. The 80s also included some notable films, including The Color Purple, which was another big hit critically and financially. Spielberg was notoriously not nominated for Best Director in that year's category, even though The Color Purple won several nominations for the categories there. His next film was Empire of the Sun, which was the first film that shot in Shanghai since the 1930s. And some people really liked it, other people not so much. It was mostly a commercial disappointment, but it did not get nominated for 6 Academy Awards. And Spielberg has said that that's one of his most enjoyable films to make. He returned to wrap up Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, passing up on the chance to direct Rain Man, which would eventually win Best Picture. But Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade went on to become a bit critical and financial hit and was seen as a massive improvement over the previous installment of the series, Temple of Doom. He would finish the decade off in 1989 by directing the remake of Always, a remake of A Guy Named Joe, one of Spielberg's childhood films, but the film did not perform well at the box office, nor did it perform well critically, so it was mostly forgotten, unfortunately. By 1991, Spielberg had felt artistically stalled. He returned to do Hook, which was a movie about a middle-aged Peter Pan played by Robin Williams, going back to Neverland to face off Dustin Hoffman's Hook. The film was a big hit financially. Critic-wise, it did okay. It did decent numbers, but it was still seen as... But it was mostly a very successful film at the box office. In 1993, Spielberg also lended his name as an executive producer to the series Sequest DSV, which only lasted 3 seasons. But 1993 was notable for two more bigger achievements for Steven Spielberg, including Jurassic Park, based off the book by Michael Crichton. The film, of course, centers around a fictional island near Costa Rica where teams of generic scientists have created a wildlife park of de-extinct dinosaurs. In a departure from his usual order of planning, Spielberg and the designers storyboarded certain sequences from the novel early on. The film also used groundbreaking CGI technology provided by Industrial Light and Magic. Jurassic Park was completed on time and on June 11, 1993, was released to theaters, becoming one of the biggest hits of all time, the highest-grossing film of all time at that point, and winning 3 Academy Awards, going on to gross over $250 million for Steven Spielberg's salary, and going on to make over $300 million domestically alone. Also that year was another year where Steven Spielberg made another groundbreaking film, Schindler's List. The movie was about Oskar Schindler, played by Liam Neeson, who is a businessman who helped save 1,100 Jews from the Holocaust. This is based off of a book by Thomas Keneally, Schindler's Ark, and Spielberg waited 10 years to make this film as he did not feel mature enough. He wanted to embrace his heritage, and after the birth of his son Max, he said that it greatly affected me. A spirit began to ignite in me, and I became a Jewish dad. So not too long after Jurassic Park was nearing completion, he went to work on this film. The end result was a film that not only was one of the most acclaimed films of the year, one of the biggest hits of the year, but it finally gave Steven Spielberg validity as a director, winning his first Academy Award as Best Director, as well as winning a Best Picture Award as well. In 1994, Steven Spielberg took a break from directing to spend more time with his family, and he also set up a new studio with Jeffrey Katzenberg, who had just been outed at Disney, and David Geffen of Geffen Records, and that studio was, of course, DreamWorks SKG. Spielberg cited more creative control and distribution improvements as the main reason for founding his own studio. He and his partners compared themselves to the founders of the United Artists back in 1919. Some of the people that were investors in there included Paul Allen and Bill Gates, the Microsoft founders. After founding DreamWorks, Spielberg continued to operate Amblin Entertainment and direct film for other studios. Besides film, Spielberg also handled the Jurassic Park attractions at Universal Studios, and eventually he would return to the director's chair with The Lost World Jurassic Park, which was a sequel, of course, to Jurassic Park, becoming another big hit financially. Critically, not so much. It was not seen as a big critical success, and it was another one of those movies that you could tell that Spielberg was so committed to another project, which came out not too long after that, which was Amistad, which was a big hit, which also underperformed at the box, but this time at the box office, and also critically too. Even though it did get a lot of bad reviews, it was seen as a mostly forgettable film for him. And he would follow that up with one of his more successful films, with Saving Private Ryan in 1998. Tom Hanks starred in the film as Captain Miller, who leads a group of U.S. soldiers who are sent to bring home a paratrooper whose 3 older brothers were killed in the same 24 hours of the Normandy landing. The film went on to become a massive hit critically and financially. It won Steven Spielberg his second Academy Award for Best Director, and he was finishing the decade as one of the top-tier directors of his craft. In 2001, Steven Spielberg produced the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which became a massive success in terms of critical reviews and also winning several awards, including Golden Globes, Emmy Awards, and it was a bigger success for Spielberg than his 2001 film AI Artificial Intelligence, which is a film that was originally intended for Stanley Kubrick to work on before he passed away in 1999. Had a lot of ambition to it, but just was not a big success on so many both critically and financially. But Spielberg will return to form in 2002 with Minority Report, which is seen as a massive success on both the critical and the financial front, as well as Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Spielberg worked with Tom Hanks again with the 2004 film The Terminal, which is a great movie, which is one that a lot of people really overlook, but it's one of his most underrated films as a filmmaker. Tom Hanks gives a great performance in this film, and shortly after that, he had 2 more films come out in 2005, War of the Worlds, which was a big hit critically and financially, as well as Munich, which was a big hit as well. It was one of Spielberg's most controversial films to date, but nevertheless, it received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Director. In the mid-2000s, Spielberg scaled down his directorial career to become more selective about film projects to undertake. He eventually sold off his rights to DreamWorks to Viacom, and by 2006, he was planning to work on Interstellar, but he eventually abandoned that project, and Christopher Nolan took that over. Spielberg would remain an active producer, though. He produced Memoirs of a Geisha, Monster House, Flags of Our Fathers, Letters from Iwo Jima, Disturbia, Transformers. He did a show on Fox called On the Lot, which didn't last very long. He will return to the director's chair one more time in 2008 to bring Indiana Jones back to theaters with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which did very well with critics and was a box office success, but fans of the series felt disappointed by it. Me personally, I still think it's the 3rd best film of the series. I still think it's better than Temple of Doom. That's just my personal opinion on it. So, in early 2009, Spielberg began shooting the first film in a planned trilogy, The Adventures of Tintin, The Secrets of the Unicorn, which did premiere in theaters in December of 2021. It did receive positive reviews and was nominated for won Best Animated Feature at the Golden Globe Awards. And while it didn't receive a Best Animated Feature nomination, it did receive a Best Original Score nomination for John Williams. That same year, he also did War Horse, which was one of 4 consecutive films that Spielberg did for Disney. War Horse had an acclaimed response by critics. I personally really do not like this film. It's one of the ones that I'd say, yeah, this is definitely maybe one of the worst films he's done as a director. And nevertheless, it was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, so what do I know? Spielberg returned to do The Pacific in 2010. He would also be a producer on J.J. Abrams' Super 8. In 2012, he directed the Abraham Lincoln film, Lincoln, with Daniel Day-Lewis, which he won a 3rd Academy Award for Best Actor for that film. The film was nominated overall for 12 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Director, and it also won Best Production Design. In 2013, Spielberg was set to direct American Sniper, but shortly afterward, Clint Eastwood took it over after he left. He instead went on to work on Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks and also Mark Rylance, in which Mark Rylance won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. A very underrated film, in my opinion. This is another great movie that Spielberg and Hanks did that is a beautifully well-made film. It's one of the best films that came out in 2015. Spielberg also did the BFG, an adaptation of the Roald Dahl children's book, which was not a big hit critically or financially, but I really liked the film a lot. It was the last film written by Melissa Mathison before she died, and Melissa Mathison, of course, wrote the original E.T. A year later, Spielberg would return to direct The Post with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep, which was both another critical and financial success. In 2018, he directed Ready Player One, which is based off the book by Ernie Cline. A fun movie overall, really fun, well-made film. Was a big hit too, but I don't think it was as big as the studio was hoping it would be, but nevertheless, it still made some money at the box office, and it's still seen as kind of a favorite of people who've seen that movie. In 2019, Spielberg filmed the musical adaptation of A West Side Story, the new version with Anson Elgort and Rachel Zegler, Ariana DeBose, who was also in it, Mike Faist, Rita Moreno from the original film. Written by Tony Kushner, the film stays true to the 1950s setting. It was finally released in December of 2021, receiving 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director. And Spielberg and Ariana DeBose won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. It was one of my favorite movies from last year. And now we come to this year. Steven Spielberg made a film about his life, a fictionalized account of his own childhood with The Fabelmans. The film was co-written by Tony Kushner of West Side Story. It starred Gabriel Lavelle playing Sammy Fabelman, a character inspired by Spielberg, while Michelle Williams plays his mother, Mitzi Fabelman. Paul Dano plays Bert Fabelman, his mother. Seth Rogen plays Benny Lowy, Bert's best friend and co-worker who becomes Sammy's surrogate uncle. And Judd Hirsch stars as Mitzi's Uncle Boris. The film was a massive success with the critics. Financially, though, it unfortunately was coming at a time where a lot of people thought that there was a decline in the popularity and relevance of Spielberg in a film-going environment altered by the COVID pandemic, and the public's loss of interest in prestige films was seen as the reason why the film did not do so well. But if you saw the film, you saw something really special, and Steven Spielberg made a great film analyzing his career and his legacy as a filmmaker, and it's just such a brilliant film. It's a movie that's just so amazing to watch. And it's just the perfect summation of why Steven Spielberg is one of the greatest directors, if not the greatest director of all time, and why I think he definitely is worthy of the Reviewing Network Achievement Award.